Hi, I'm Beth Nieman Hacker. I am the Director of Global Insights and Analytics here at Tate & Lyle. I am located just outside the Chicago area. I wish, however, I could be with you today. However, just know that my colleague Diane will be happy to answer any questions you have with regard to my presentation. And I'm excited to jump on in and share with you what we've learned about dairy and dairy alternatives among consumers, and specifically consumers, South African consumers. So those that are close to you, and some of them may be you. My presentation today will cover a dairy market overview, trends and insights of the dairy and non-dairy space, and an overall summary of the findings. Let's start by looking at the dairy market growth. So the global dairy market growth and innovation is flat to declining in the past 5 years, except in the Middle East and Africa. On the left side of the slide, you will see the total volume of global dairy market from 2018 to 2022 with an overall growth of 1.4%. This starts at 89 billion kilograms, growing to 94 billion kilograms. On the right side of the slide, we see the growth of the dairy products, and these are the launches from the same time period, 2018 to 2022, an overall decline of 3% in product launches in that same time period. So all major regions are experiencing the decline except for Middle East and Africa and South Africa, with Middle East and Africa increasing in their product launches at 19% over that time period, and South Africa increasing at 8%. However, the future of global dairy market is promising, especially in the subcategories such as dairy alternatives and yogurt. On the left side, once again, we see this as global dairy volume, representing a forecast growth from 2022 to 2027. We see an increase of 1.7% in North America to 4.8% in the Middle East and Africa, with a 2.7% in volume growth in South Africa. Looking into subcategories of the overall dairy category, yogurt has the highest share of dairy category, with 21% of the total share going up to 22% in 2027, for nearly a 3% compound annual growth rate. While smaller as far as share, we see that the dairy alternatives such as the grain, the nut, the rice milk will grow nearly 6% over the next 5 years. So a lot of upside opportunity going on there. So while product launches were down since 2018, dairy products that were launched carried a variety of on-pack claims, some growing over time faster than the category. No surprise, plant-based claims experienced the highest growth of 31% since 2018. Other notable areas are the environmental and sustainable claims, but also sugar-free and no added sugar claims are growing compared to things like low or reduced sugar. So you see here, manufacturers are making the claim that there's no sugar or no added sugar. For the Middle East, ethical claims and halal certifications are commonly seen on pack. So let's talk about consumers' drivers of purchase. What is inspiring them to consume dairy, how frequently they consume dairy, and what products they're consuming. So as a side note, I've done some additional analyses on this research to look at generations to see if there's any differences between the generations, and we see that there are. But I also want to note, because I have to remind myself when I speak about the different generations, what's the age range of these particular generations? So in the proprietary research that I will reference in the upcoming slides, we spoke to 402 South African consumers ages 18 to 77. Gen Z are those who are 18 to 28 years old. Millennials are 29 to 43. Gen X, 44 to 58 years of age, and baby boomers, 59 to 77. So let's look at the results from the proprietary research, starting with purchase considerations by generation. In the subsequent slides, you will see a breakout by generation, as I had mentioned. If there's a significant difference in the responses from one generation to the next, it will be called out as you see here. So Gen Z, as an example, will have an A by it. Millennials will have a B, Gen X a C, and baby boomers a D. So for example, we see that consumers are looking for value for what they spend on dairy products, with value for the money being the top consideration in dairy purchases, especially among the older generations. The A and B you see says that 69% of Gen X consumers are significantly more likely to say that value for the money is a top consideration compared to Gen Z consumers at 43% or millennials at 50%. While not significantly greater than the others, Gen Z consumers prioritize health benefits listed on the packaging and flavor. So with 45% of the Gen Z consumers saying that the top consideration is the health benefits, and 44% of Gen Z consumers saying that flavor is important. So you see that 45 and 44 greater than value for the money. So Gen Z or your younger generations are looking at something more than just what they're paying for the product. They're looking for other benefits as well. One other area I would like to call your attention to is environmentally friendly product and sustainably sourced ingredient attributes. Consumers are less inclined to say these are in their consideration set when purchasing dairy products. And if you remember, on the product launch claim data that we showed earlier, these claims were growing about 7 to 10%, and that's what manufacturers are claiming on pack. So there might be a little disconnect between what manufacturers are claiming on pack and what exactly is impacting purchase on the consumers as far as what they're really paying attention to. So they're not necessarily paying attention to those sustainability type claims yet. It's not influencing their purchase decision. They're more inclined to be looking at the value for the money, the health benefits, nutrition facts, and obviously then flavor and taste. In addition to what's being called out on packaging, the majority of consumers look to friends and family to inform their purchases. However, more than one half also turn to the internet. 63% of Gen Z consumers find their information on YouTube. Nearly 1/3 of Gen Z use Instagram or Facebook to get their information about dairy. However, in total, regardless of generation, 2 out of 3 consumers turn to health and wellness websites to get their information. Yet 19%, so almost 1 in 5 baby boomers have never researched a dairy or dairy alternative product online. So the key message here is you can definitely talk to the younger consumers online, but there's some other method that you need to be reaching those baby boomers in order to attract them or to inform them more about dairy and or dairy alternatives. So let's get into the details of the frequency of consumption, what it is exactly that South African consumers are consuming as it relates to dairy products across all generations. So you see here that the frequency of dairy products is high, regardless of the generations, but more indulgent categories are consumed less frequently across the board. Yet, for example, when we look at the frequency of consumption of dairy cheese, this is significantly lower in the younger consumers compared to the older consumers. So for example, 74% of the Gen Z eat cheese at least once a week compared to 87% of millennials. Both are very high, but there are significantly more millennials and Gen X consumers eating dairy cheese. Younger consumers are more likely, though, to be indulging in the ice cream, the dairy desserts, and the flavored milk, but to a lesser extent compared to the other dairy products. When asked about their consumption behavior compared to 3 years ago, a large majority of South African consumers are consuming as much or more dairy than they did 3 years ago. 39% of the consumers we spoke to said they're actually consuming more dairy than they did 3 years ago. 42% of the consumers said they're consuming the same amount, and 19% of the consumers are consuming fewer dairy products than they did 3 years ago. When we're looking at the differences by generation, it's surprising that Gen Z consumers and millennials are reporting that they're consuming more dairy than they did 3 years ago. That 51% and 53% respectively is significantly greater than the 30% for Gen X and baby boomers at 18%. So the younger generation is telling us that they are consuming more dairy than they did 3 years ago. So when asked the consumers who said that they were consuming less, so the 19%, what it would take for them to consume more dairy in the future. Interesting, and thankfully, 9 out of 10 Gen Z, millennials, and Gen X consumers who had decreased their consumption said they would increase their consumption in the future. The key areas where they said that they would need more consideration around is affordability of dairy products, the healthfulness of the product, such as no added sugar, products that have a longer shelf life, and to a lesser extent, but still important to them, is those environmental certifications. On the other hand, 1/3 of baby boomers who decreased their consumption in the past 3 years have no desire to increase consumption. So if they've lost it or if they've decreased it, there's a concern there that you're not going to bring them back. So the importance here is maintaining and retaining those baby boomers. So because they leave, they may not be coming back. So in another area of exploration, we wanted to understand the perceptions of dairy products. Generations agree, regardless of age, that dairy products taste great. But they also agree that there are health benefits of the dairy products, such as supporting bone health. The dairy products are a good source of protein, and they also help boost immunity. The differences that we see as far as in generations and perception of dairy is Gen Z consumers agree that dairy helps in muscle recovery. However, they're also telling us that their perception is that dairy has too much fat, sugar, and allergens. Gen Z and millennials agree, though, that dairy is good for digestive health, and they more so than the baby boomers. So they are recognizing digestive health and the impact of dairy has on digestive health more so than the baby boomers do. So when are they consuming these particular products? So according to what our South African consumers tell us, dairy products are consumed throughout the day, and cheese is commonly eaten for all meal occasions, and ice cream occasions are for snacking. The meal occasion behavior is important as it helps us innovate for day part or mood or specific consumer needs, perhaps as a pick-me-up in the afternoon. So let me know if you find a caffeinated ice cream, because I'm going to be all over it, because I'm going to need that as an afternoon snack as well. So now that we know all about dairy consumption behavior among South Africans, let's talk about non-dairy or dairy alternatives. So looking at the market landscape, what are we seeing? So earlier we saw a 3% decline in dairy product launches in dairy products. Well, in the plant-based category, specifically for spoonable yogurt and other dairy, we see there's a 4% increase in the same time period. So from 2018 to 2022, there's a 4% increase in product launches in the dairy alternative space. What we see here is there's single-digit growth in Europe, in Asia Pacific, and Latin America. However, in the Middle East and Africa and South Africa specifically, there's substantial growth at 29% and 22% respectively. Interesting, as we saw in dairy products, sugar-free like claims are also growing, but also claims such as high or added fiber and protein seem to be very important in this particular space as well. And that's what manufacturers are calling out on pack. When we look at our proprietary survey data, we see Gen Z and millennials are significantly more likely to be consuming dairy alternatives at least once a week compared to Gen X and baby boomers. However, across all non-dairy subcategories, regardless of generation, weekly consumption of any of these subcategories is lower than their dairy counterparts. Not to mention, about 1/2 of South African consumers are saying that they've never consumed any of these non-dairy subcategories. So you see here, about 50% of the population, give or take, across the board are saying, I've never tried this. And so there's a huge opportunity, regardless of generation, to increase understanding, awareness of these particular types of products. But when we look specifically at this chart, it's an interesting pattern here. So in non-dairy, as an example, 40% of your Gen Z consumers say that they had a non-dairy milk in the past week, compared to 31% of your millennials, 24% of your Gen X, and 15% of your baby boomers. So you see that Gen Z consumers significantly higher consumption of non-dairy milk in the past week compared to the Gen X and the baby boomers, and that 31% for millennials is significantly greater than the baby boomers. And you see a similar trend, whether it's non-dairy yogurt, non-dairy cheese, ice cream, refrigerated drinks, and so on, or refrigerated desserts and non-flavored milk. So interesting pattern here. And what we're seeing is, though, the younger generation is consuming more here, and you saw a little bit that they were maybe not consuming as much dairy products. In total, I would venture a guess to say that your younger consumers, specifically your Gen Z consumers, when you take your dairy and your non-dairy products combined, they're consuming a lot. So when are they consuming the non-dairy products? So they're consumed primarily in the morning or the afternoon, but there's no real clear meal occasion, suggesting that consumers are still exploring dairy alternatives and how that fits in their routine. Dinner is definitely not a meal occasion for dairy alternatives. However, once again, that late night snack or after dinner dessert, that's where they're getting their ice cream and their refrigerated desserts. So that's where they will most likely be consuming the non-dairy alternatives, more of a snack in the evening, but definitely not for a dinner occasion. When asked if consumers had a particular preference about the type of source or what the source of their plant-based dairy was coming from, oat is the major source of plant-based products. At 63% of the consumers we spoke to said that they would prefer oat. 58% said they would prefer almond, and 57% coconut. And you can see here there are a lot of different products that are being launched in different parts of the world. So whether it's rice, sesame, coconut, or even a mix of almond and soy with Kite Hill in the US, or Canadian product as far as the almond and rice drink, and in Austria, Germany, and so on. And so they're trying a lot of different plant-based sources. And I think at the end of the day, as long as it's plant-based and it's a dairy alternative, something that might be interesting to them, whether they're looking at the flavor or the health benefit, it's something that they're going to try. So where does this bring us? We've learned a lot about consumers' consumption of dairy products and non-dairy products. And what's this tell us? So if you remember, there's an opportunity to maintain or even increase the consumption of dairy products in South Africa, with a goal to retain those baby boomers, because once they leave, they may not be coming back. While Gen Z is the biggest consumer of non-dairy alternatives, They are also consuming dairy products. So there's a lot of opportunity to attract the Gen Z consumer, whether it's dairy or dairy alternatives. And they're still trying to figure out that meal occasion for the dairy alternative. So it may slot in where they're not consuming the dairy products. Lowering fat and sugar content offers manufacturers the biggest opportunity to attract Gen Z consumers and attract them back into the dairy products if they have left. However, offering and communicating excellent taste, improved or balanced nutritional values, and definitely affordability should help to increase dairy purchases regardless of age. Environmental matters and longer shelf life should not be forgotten, however, for supporting the growth of consumption of dairy, as these were called out as a part of their consideration eventually. So I think the more the manufacturers talk about the importance of environment, sustainability, and et cetera, consumers will start to see this and say, you know, this is something I should be thinking about, and therefore it's going to impact my purchase decision of products. And finally, social media is key to influencing younger generation. There's no surprise here. Brands have the opportunity to enhance their reputation and to maintain and gain that market share. So the question is, if the baby boomers aren't looking to social media, how is it? What's the flip side of this as far as how are you or should you be attracting those baby boomers and retaining them? So that's what I have for you today. Once again, I wish I were there with you, but I appreciate the opportunity to share this information with you among dairy consumers and dairy alternative consumers in your neck of the woods. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Diane. Thank you.